Lesson 3.5, Midpoint Is. Our objective is for you, the student, to be able to find the midpoint given 2 points. I think you can do it. Let's start with a practice problem. What I'm asking you right now is, what is the midpoint between A and B? Here and here. Now, we should probably remind ourselves what a midpoint is. So let's fill in this little definition over to the left. What is going on? A midpoint is a point on a line segment, line seg, because I ran out of space, that divides it in half. That's it. It's just a point that's like right in the middle, and it divides in half. So if I want to find the midpoint between A and B, a good way to do it would be to find the total distance and then cut that in half. So let's find that. Let's see how far these 2 points are from each other. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and 10. So these have a distance of 10 from each other. So if I want to find the midpoint, it'd probably be halfway in there, or 5 away, right? So if I counted 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that would be my midpoint, because now it's in half. 5 this way, 5 more this way, and it happens to be that 1 is our midpoint. But there's an easier way to do things, and that's why I love math. We got our little tricks to the trade. Another way we can do it is to add the distance from A to B. Just figure out this distance. So if A is at -4 and B is at 6, I add this total distance, -4 plus 6, and that gives me 2. And I'll just divide that total distance in half like we just did. And 2 divided by 2 equals 1. Oh my gosh! It's like magic. It's the same thing. Okay, so I guess this works. When you add the 2 points, or find the total distance divided by 2, that tells you the midpoint. Now let's expand this to 2 dimensions on the coordinate plane, and we're going to find the midpoint of this line right here. Now we can't just count, because you have these parts where it doesn't really go through like one square, so you can't just count how many squares there are. It's uneven. So we need a formula. And the way to do it is simply this. We're going to take the 2 y coordinates, add those together and cut that in half. Find that total distance and cut in half. And we're going to do our 2 x coordinates and cut that in half again, just like we did before. And when we have our x midpoint and our y midpoint, that will give us the actual coordinate. Now what am I talking about? Let's figure this out. Well, our 2 points here are 0, 1, and if you count this out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is 6, 5. If I want to find the midpoint for the y, what's in the middle here, what I'm going to do is add my y coordinates. And this is my first y coordinate, we'll call it y1, and this is my second y coordinate, this is y2. So I'll add up 1 and 5. I take 1 and 5, I add those together, I get 6 divided by 2, and that equals 3. So this is my y midpoint. Now I also want to get my x midpoint. So over here, my x1, if you look at it right here, that's my first x, right? And that's my second x. So I'll call that x2. And so it's going to be 0 plus 6. And when I add those together, I once again get 6. And I'll also divide by 2. And that's 3. That worked out nicely. So that means my midpoint will be, well, my x is 3 and my y is 3. Whoop. And so that should be my midpoint. Now, I just don't believe formulas, so let's see if this actually works. So let's go up 3. 1, 2, 3. Let's go over 3. 1, 2, 3. And does this point right here look like it's the midpoint? Yeah, it looks like it's right in the middle to me. So I'd say this is congruent to this, but that's not important. Yes, using this formula where we add up the 2 y coordinates and divide it by 2 and add up 2 x coordinates and divide by 2 gives us our midpoint. Boom! So our midpoint formula, we just kind of figured it out. What we have to do is add our 2 x's, x1 plus x2, right? And divide that number by 2, and that's our x coordinate. And then we have y1 plus y2, and we divide that number by 2, and that's our y coordinate. And that's our midpoint formula. Done did it. So let's try it. Let's see if this actually works on other problems. So we want to find the midpoint of Mn with the endpoints M, 1, 2, and N, 7, 6. Alright, so there's 5 steps to do this, to really find out the midpoint and check your answers and everything. And if you follow these 5 steps, you'll be fine. The first thing to do is label your coordinates. And we've learned to do that, and we're getting good at it. So this is our x1, and this is our y1, and this is our x2, and this is our y2. All right, xy, xy. Done. Step 2 is to write down the midpoint formula. And luckily enough, I did it for you, but it's always good just for your memory to write down the midpoint formula. It's hard memorizing formulas, but if you keep writing them, you'll get good at it. Step 3 is to substitute the coordinates into the formula. So to find the x midpoint, the x coordinate of the midpoint, we have to do x1, which is 1, okay, and add that to the x2, which is 7. We're going to divide that by 2. And then we have to also do that for the y. So y1's 2, and y2 is 6. All right, we add these together, we get 8 divided by 2. And for this one, we also get 2 plus 6 is 8 divided by 2. And that's what our midpoint will equal. And let's put this in the calculator and see what this number is equal to. So our m is equal to 4, 4. Now I realize the last two midpoints have been on the same exact place. The coordinates have been the same. That's not always how it is. I made these lessons. I forgot to, whatever. Anyway, they're not always the same, but it just happens that you get it. So let's see if 4, 4 even looks like it's the midpoint of our 2 points, okay? So point M is 1, 2, which is 1, 2 over here. And point N is 7, 6, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? And let's draw a nice little line there. Get a line going right here. Good. Now our midpoint is 4, 4. So let's see if it actually looks like it's really the midpoint. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right over here. And does that look like it's right in the middle? Sure is. So our midpoint, 4, 4, is the midpoint. We did it! Just in case you didn't follow along, let's try it one more time. Okay? We want to find the coordinate of midpoint of AB with the endpoint of A, negative 4, 1, and B, 6, 4. So first thing, we're going to label it x1, y1, x1, y1, and x2, y2. Remember, that just means our first x, our first y, our second x, our second y. Step 2 is to write down our formula. So m equals, well, it goes x1 plus x2 over 2, comma, y1 plus y2 over 2. We now plug into our formula, okay? We're going to substitute coordinates into our formula. So m is going to equal negative 4 plus 6 over 2, comma, 1 plus 4 over 2. All right. Negative 4 plus 6 is 2 over 2. And 1 plus 4 over 2 is 5 over 2. When we figure out what this is, we get m equals 1. Our midpoint equals 1. And 5 divided by 2, yeah, it's a decimal. It's 2.5. And that is the midpoint. All right. So let's see if this even works. It's a good idea just to graph it, to always check your answers. So we have negative 4, 1 is one of our points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And 6, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now we're predicting that our midpoint should be at 1, 2.5. Let's see if that's the case. So if I go over 1 and up 1, 2.5, which is right here, looks good. That's my point. And does that look like it's right in the middle? Besides my crappy points that I drew, yeah, that looks like it's in the middle. So this is A, this is B, and this is our midpoint. Right over here at 1, 2.5. So decimals are okay. Don't freak out if you get a decimal. Final two problems. We're going to actually change up the question a little bit. Q is the midpoint of MN. All right? If the coordinates of M are 1 and 2, and Q, which is the midpoint, find the coordinate of the other endpoint. So let's be clear here. We know Q is the midpoint, and we know the midpoint and one of the sides. We're trying to find the other endpoint here, which is a very different question. So let me show you how this is done. The first thing to do is label everything. So this is x1, y1. That's your first endpoint. And here's our midpoint. Q is the midpoint. So this is mx and my. All right, that means the midpoint of x, midpoint y. So what I've done is split up the formula a bit. Instead of just having the midpoint equals this and this, the midpoint of x is x1 plus x2 over 2. Midpoint of y is y1 plus 2 over 2. And what we're going to do is substitute the values in. So we know the midpoint of x is 4. All right, that's right there. And we know one of the x values is 1. But we don't know the other x value. So we're just going to put an x over here. We're trying to figure out what this other x value is. For our other midpoint of y, we know our y midpoint is 2. All right? And we know one of the coordinates is 2, but we don't know what the y coordinate is. So what we have to do is solve for this. And the way to do that is this. You're going to take both equations and you're going to multiply both sides by 2. Okay? We're going to take both of these equations and multiply both sides by 2. Now, what's that do? When I multiply both sides by 2, I can cancel out this 2 in the bottom because that makes it a hard equation to solve. And what I get is 2 times 4 is 8, which equals 1 plus x. Now, notice I didn't distribute the 2 to this side. I just canceled out the bottom. That's why I even multiplied it by 2. Now, for my y's, I'm doing the same thing. 2 times 2 is 4. And these 2's just cancel out, so I get 2 plus y. Now what I'm going to do is solve these. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. I'm solving for x, and I get x equals 7. I'm going to subtract 2 from this, both sides here, to solve for y, and I get y equals 2. And so these are my two coordinates, so I'm saying n is going to be 0.72. Well, let's graph it. I think graphing is a good way to kind of check things out and see if you got it. So we know m is 1, 2, 1, 2, all right? And we know q, which is our midpoint, is 4, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's up 2. We want to find the midpoint. So the midpoint is apparently, sorry, not the midpoint, the other endpoint. So let's try it. We're going to find out that it's at 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hold on, I think I graphed the slope point wrong. 4, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, sorry, right here, 4, 2. I miscounted. So this point is at 7, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and up 2. All right, so let's see. We put our line here, and let's label our points. This is M, this is Q, and this is N. And does it look like N is the endpoint that makes this Q the midpoint? Yeah, this looks actually right. So it looks like 7, 2 would be the other endpoint to make Q the midpoint. And we did it. So let's try. So check it. Let's try it one more time. Q is the midpoint of MN. If the coordinates of M are negative 4, 1, and Q is 1, 0, find the coordinate of endpoint N. So let's look at this visually first. I'm going to actually start by graphing. M is negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, which is right here, and that's point M. I don't know why I put that. That is point M. And our other point is Q, which is 1, 0, which is right here. And we're trying to find out the other endpoint, right? So this is Q, which is the midpoint, and I'm trying to find the other endpoint, which should be like somewhere over here, right? To make this the midpoint. Somewhere like, no, maybe a little more up. I guess we'll have to figure it out. And I'm just going to draw a line through it, see if something actually, we can get this to work. It's going to be somewhere around there. So, first thing we're going to do, we're going to label everything. Our first endpoint is x1, y1. Our midpoints is mx, my. That's our midpoint right here. We're going to plug things in. All right, mx equals 1. Our x1 is negative 4. And we just fill the rest in. I don't know why I put a 0 there. So it equals negative 4 plus x, because that's we're looking for the other x point over 2. And our my is 0. And our y1 is 1 plus y, which we don't know, over 2. Oh. So what's our next step? We got. Oh, you ruined. Sorry about that. Let's get back into it. What we're going to do now is multiply both sides by 2 because we're solving for this x and we hate this 2 over here. So let's multiply both sides by 2. 2 and 2. When we do that, these 2's cancels out and we just distribute this 2. So we get 2 equals negative 4 plus x. Remember, this 2 canceled out. We're going to do it over here now. Multiply by 2 and 2. And 2 times 0 is 0, which equals these cancel. We get 1 plus y. Alright, we're going to solve for y now. So, we're going to add 4 to both sides to solve for x. And when we do that, we get x equals 6. And over here, we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. Alright? And we get y equals negative 1. So our new point, our other endpoint, is going to be x6, y negative 1. And let's see if that looks right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Negative 1 right here. Oh my gosh. Look at that. That looks to be just in the middle again. Formula worked. We are geniuses. Peace. I'm out.